Her voice cuts across the silence, dripping with contempt. That's right, get him out. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, it's free, and it allows us to keep bringing you stories just like this one. Your support means everything. Let's grow this community together. And one more thing, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country down in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Thank you so much. Now let's get into it. The grand lobby of the hotel gleams with marble floors so polished they mirror the crystal chandelier overhead. Golden sconces line the white walls, and the heavy wooden doors at the far end let in a sharp glow of daylight. The air is tense, brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Guests whisper, phones raised discreetly, recording what no one expected to witness on a quiet afternoon. And then it happens. The blonde receptionist at the counter leans back, arms crossed, her lips curling into a smug grin. Her voice cuts across the silence, dripping with contempt. That's right, get him out. Her laugh follows sharp, mocking, filling the entire lobby. The brunette beside her keeps her composure, lips pressed tight, eyes cold, judgmental. All eyes swing to the man standing in the center of the lobby. He's about 30, fit, wearing a plain gray t-shirt and a black cap. His jaw tightens, shoulders squared even as two uniformed officers clutch his arms. His wrists are already pulled back in steel cuffs, the chain clinking faintly as he breathes. For a moment, he doesn't speak. He just stares at her, his eyes locked like steel on the blonde's mocking smile. The chandelier light catches the sweat at his temple, but his expression is steady, controlled, almost calm, too calm. The officers flanking him exchange uneasy glances. They can feel the tension in his muscles, the restrained power, the storm simmering just under the surface. "You have no idea," he mutters, low but firm, his words carrying just enough to silence the murmurs behind the camera phones. The blonde scoffs again, tilting her chin upward as if she'd already won. She doesn't see it, or maybe she refuses to, but the man's eyes don't belong to someone defeated. They belong to someone calculating. From the far side of the lobby, the security detail shifts uncomfortably, forming a line, stiff postures betraying unease. One guest gasps softly as if sensing something about to erupt. And then, without warning, the man takes a single half-step forward. The officers yank him back instantly, gripping his arms tighter, their voices sharp. "Stay still. Don't make this harder." But his voice rises above theirs, firm and cutting. "You've got 20 minutes. The room freezes. Even the blonde's smirk falters for a fraction of a second before returning. Wider, louder, more arrogant, though now it feels forced. The chandelier hums overhead. The marble floor seems to hold its breath. Every camera phone is aimed directly at him, recording this confrontation that no one will be able to forget. The echo of his words still lingers in the air. "You've got 20 minutes. The guests exchange nervous glances, some whispering, others just holding their phones higher to make sure they don't miss a single frame. The chandelier glows fiercely above, flooding the marble with cold white light that makes the whole scene feel like a stage. The blonde receptionist recovers quickly, her lips stretching into that same arrogant smile, but now there's a flicker of tension in her eyes. She leans forward, voice sharp, carrying through the entire lobby. 20 minutes? You won't last two. The officers will make sure of that." The brunette beside her nods slightly, her voice calm but edged with disdain. "It's already over. Stop pretending you have power here." The man doesn't look away. His wrists are bound, his arms gripped tightly by the officers, but his posture doesn't crumble. If anything, he seems taller, stronger, as if the cuffs themselves are meaningless. His gaze stays locked on the blonde, and when he speaks again, his voice is steady, deliberate, slicing through her mocking tone. "Over?" He pauses, letting the silence bite. "Number. It's only just begun." The words ripple through the crowd. A guest near the back lowers her phone, eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Security guards shift uneasily, their stoic masks cracking for just a moment. Even one of the officers gripping his arm tightens his hold, as though bracing for something he can't name. The blonde laughs again, louder this time, her arrogance trying to drown out the unease. She throws a glance to her colleague, then back at him, as if to rally the room against him. "Listen to yourself. You're in cuffs, in custody, and still pretending you're in control. You're nothing more than a trespasser who thought he could bluff his way into a place like this. Her voice is venom, but her laughter betrays a nervous edge. The man's eyes narrow, but he doesn't raise his voice. Instead, he leans forward ever so slightly, forcing the officers to pull him back. The chains of his cuffs rattle softly, echoing against the marble. You think I came here unprepared? Every second you waste laughing is already against you. The chandelier hums faintly as though vibrating with his words. Guests glance at each other, sensing the weight of his warning. A man in the back lowers his camera, brows knit together. The brunette receptionist stiffens, her calm demeanor cracking into suspicion. The blonde tries to hold her composure, scoffing again, but her smirk doesn't reach her eyes this time. That's enough, one officer barks, his voice cutting through the tension. He jerks the man's arm, pulling him back hard. We're moving him now. The crowd parts slightly as the officers shift, preparing to drag him toward the glowing double doors at the far end. But as they move, the man tilts his head once more toward the blonde, his words low but clear enough to send a shiver through the lobby. Remember my face. When the 20 minutes are up, you'll wish you had listened. The blonde freezes, her mocking grin faltering, the sound of her laughter dying in her throat. Guests gasp softly. Phones zoom closer, desperate to catch every detail. The tension thickens. The countdown has begun. The officers tighten their grip and begin leading the man toward the doors, their polished boots striking against marble, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The crowd shifts, phones rising higher. No one is looking at the officers anymore. Every lens, every pair of eyes, stays locked on the man in gray. The blonde receptionist, emboldened by the sight of him being pushed away, lets out another sharp laugh. See? I told you. That's where people like you belong outside. Her tone drips with triumph, the kind of confidence that comes from believing the fight is already won. But then, something unexpected happens. The man doesn't resist, doesn't struggle. Instead, he straightens his shoulders, his steps steady, almost commanding, even while restrained. And then he speaks again, louder this time, so the entire lobby can hear. You think you've silenced me, but it's you who's on display. Look around. Murmurs ripple through the room. Guests glance at each other nervously, phones trembling slightly in their hands. The chandeliers blaze overhead, pouring white light onto every corner, leaving nothing in shadow. For the first time, the receptionist notices the crowd's unease. Their eyes aren't mocking with her. They're questioning her. The brunette receptionist shifts uncomfortably, her lips pressing into a thin line. She leans closer to the blonde, whispering something that doesn't reach the cameras. The blonde's grin wavers, but she forces it back, arms crossing tightly against her chest. One officer pulls harder at the man's arm. Keep moving. But before the doors, the man stops. The chain of his cuffs rattles again, sharp and deliberate, demanding attention. He turns his head just enough for his words to echo. Tick-tock. 19 minutes. Gasps sweep across the lobby. A guest lowers her phone, eyes wide. The older man with the camera in the back stops clicking, staring at the scene as if realizing this is bigger than a simple removal. The blonde's laugh dies completely this time. She tries to scoff, to wave it off, but the silence around her is deafening. For the first time, she realizes she's losing control of the room. The officers shove him forward again, but the damage is done. His words are planted like a seed in everyone's mind, a countdown that no one can unhear. The officers push him forward again, but the room no longer feels like theirs to control. Every guest, every phone, every uneasy whisper follows the man's words. 19 minutes. It hangs in the air like a ticking clock only he can hear. The blonde receptionist forces herself to laugh, but the sound cracks halfway through. She straightens her blazer, standing taller, her voice raised to reclaim the room. Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. Just another nobody trying to scare us. But even as she says it, the guests don't turn their eyes back to her. They stay fixed on the man in cuffs, walking with the kind of composure that doesn't belong to someone cornered. The brunette receptionist leans closer, whispering again. This time, her voice carries just enough. People are starting to believe him. The blonde glares, hissing under her breath. Then keep quiet. Don't give him more attention. But it's too late. The man stops again. This time, the officers shove harder, but he plants his feet, forcing them to halt. His head lifts toward the chandelier, as though addressing not just the receptionists, but everyone within the gleaming marble walls. You think I came here by accident? You think this is just about me? His voice grows louder, resonant, filling the room. Look around you. Every second you waste trying to humiliate me is another second you can't get back. The words ripple through the crowd like a wave. A woman in a red dress lowers her phone, her lips parting in shock. A man in a tuxedo frowns, shifting uncomfortably. The security guards along the wall exchange wary glances, their once solid formation cracking. The blonde slams her hand on the desk. Enough! Officers, remove him immediately. But her command doesn't ring with the same authority anymore. The guests have seen too much. They've felt the weight in his voice. The officers tug at his arms, pulling him toward the glowing double doors. His feet slide forward on polished marble, but his eyes never leave hers. Even restrained, even surrounded, he radiates control. 18 minutes, he announces firmly. The room gasps. Someone in the back whispers, "He's counting down." Another voice responds, "What happens when it hits 0? The blonde's lips tremble before she forces them into another smirk, but the mask is cracking and everyone can see it. Her laugh this time is hollow, desperate. "You're pathetic," she spits, but her eyes betray her. The chandelier gleams brighter above, its crystals scattering shards of white light across the marble. Every detail feels magnified, the rattling of his cuffs, the echo of his footsteps, the uneven rhythm of her breathing. The stage is set, and the countdown continues. The echo of footsteps on polished marble filled the grand lobby as the officers pulled him closer toward the towering double doors. The chandelier blazed overhead, its cold white light scattering across the floor like shattered glass. This wasn't just a hotel anymore. It felt like a stage, and every guest, every guard, every receptionist was now trapped inside the performance. For a few moments, the only sounds were the clinking of handcuffs and the heavy boots of the officers. But then, a shift, a crack in the silence. "Wait!" A man in a tailored suit near the front called out. He lowered his phone just slightly, confusion written across his face. What does he mean by 18 minutes? The question hung in the air, slicing through the tension. Another voice rose from the back, this time softer, but audible. A woman clutching her purse tightly leaned forward. Is this real? What's happening here?" Gasps spread like wildfire. Guests turned to one another, murmuring, their whispers bouncing off the marble walls. The officers didn't pause, but now their steps seemed heavier, slower, as if they too had been caught by the weight of the man's words. He straightened his back, despite the steel biting into his wrists. His voice rose, steady and commanding, cutting above the murmurs. 18 minutes left, he said, every syllable deliberate. His gaze swept across the lobby, meeting eyes, forcing them to listen. "Ask yourselves, why do you think I came here today?" The room froze. It wasn't a question. It was a warning, disguised as an invitation. The blonde receptionist slammed her palm against the polished white desk, the sharp sound cracking through the tension. "Don't listen to him," she barked, her voice trembling at the edges. "He's manipulating you. He's nothing." But her tone betrayed her. It wasn't the steady authority of someone in control, it was the desperate pitch of someone slipping. Her laughter, once sharp and mocking, had disappeared completely. In its place was a forced bravado that rang hollow against the marble. The guests weren't convinced. Phones stayed up, cameras zooming in, but not on her. All lenses were pointed toward the man in gray. The brunette receptionist shifted uneasily, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes flicked toward him. She didn't speak, but her silence screamed. It was as if even she no longer fully believed in the narrative the blonde was trying to control. The man didn't break his stare. His voice, calm yet edged with steel, rolled through the lobby. "You see her panic. You hear the cracks in her voice. Every second you waste mocking me is another second gone. Time doesn't lie." The guests reacted instantly. Someone whispered, "He's right. She does sound scared." Another voice muttered, "Why would he keep counting down if it was just an act?" The blonde's composure faltered. She looked around, realizing the shift in the room. Her confidence, once unshakable, was unraveling in front of dozens of recording eyes. The man inhaled deeply, his chest rising against the grip of the officers. He tilted his head just slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. 17 minutes, he said, low but resonant. The silence that followed was crushing. Guests stiffened, their whispers silenced. Security guards who had been lined against the wall shifted awkwardly, their posture breaking. One officer tugged harder at his arm, But even in chains, even restrained, he commanded the atmosphere. The chandelier flickered, its crystals scattering 1,000 shards of white light across his face. Every camera caught the same image. The mocking grin gone from the blonde's lips, her jaw tight, her eyes betraying fear. The countdown had become real. The words still echoed 17 minutes. The guests stood frozen, eyes darting between the man in cuffs and the receptionists. The silence in the marble lobby wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with whispers no one dared to speak aloud. The blonde receptionist's chest rose sharply, her forced smile now completely gone. Her hand trembled as she adjusted her blazer, but the small gesture didn't hide her unraveling composure. The brunette next to her shifted again, hands tightening at her waist, her gaze falling to the floor for the first time. "Move him now!" the blonde snapped, her voice cracking. The officers responded instantly, jerking his arms harder, pulling him toward the massive wooden doors glowing with white light from outside. The chains clinked, rattling against the tension, yet even dragged. The man didn't stumble. His posture stayed upright, unbroken, every step deliberate, as though he was the one dictating the pace. The guests noticed. They leaned forward. Phones zoomed closer. Every lens framed the same image, a restrained man who looked more powerful than those who claimed authority. One officer leaned in close to him, muttering through clenched teeth, "Shut up, you're done." The man's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but something colder, something that made even the officer hesitate. He spoke louder, ensuring the entire room could hear. 16 minutes. Gasps rippled across the lobby. A woman near the back pressed her hand against her mouth. Another man whispered to the person beside him, "What happens when he hits 0? The murmur spread like a current, infecting every corner of the room. The blonde slammed her palm down again, but the sound no longer commanded attention. "He's lying, don't let him scare you." Her words rang hollow, bouncing uselessly off the marble walls. The brunette raised her eyes at last, studying the man in gray. For the first time, doubt flickered across her features. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but she stopped herself, swallowing the words back. The man turned his head slightly, his eyes locking on the blonde. His voice cut sharp and clean. "It's not fear that bothers you, it's the truth. You know exactly what happens when time runs out." "Oh." Her face drained of color. She looked away quickly, but the cameras had already captured it. A security guard near the wall shifted, his stance no longer rigid. His eyes darted toward the blonde, then back to the man, uncertainty carved across his face. He wasn't the only one. The row of black suits, once perfectly aligned, now looked fractured tiny cracks appearing in the wall of authority. The officers pulled again, dragging him closer to the doors, but every step he took, every word he spoke, only drew the room deeper under his control. 16 minutes left, and everyone could feel the countdown. The silence that followed his words was heavier than the marble pillars holding up the grand lobby. 16 minutes. It wasn't just a number anymore. It was a countdown echoing in every corner, crawling under the skin of everyone present. The blonde receptionist's laugh broke through the air, but it was brittle, hollow. "Pathetic," she spat, her lips curling though her voice cracked on the last syllable. "He's nothing more than a criminal in handcuffs. Don't be fooled by his little act." But the words didn't land the way she hoped. The crowd wasn't buying it, not anymore. Dozens of phones stayed trained on the man in gray, not on her. Their lenses zoomed in on his face, on his calm defiance, on the chilling steadiness of a man who seemed to dictate every second, even in chains. A man in a tailored suit near the center lowered his phone slightly, shaking his head. His voice carried clearly across the lobby. "Then why does he look like the only one in control?" The impact was instant. Gasps spread through the crowd, heads turned, eyes widening. The murmurs that followed weren't hushed anymore. They were louder, bolder, emboldened by the simple truth no one could ignore. The brunette receptionist stiffened, her posture betraying her. Her eyes darted nervously between her colleague and the man in gray. The calm, judgmental facade she had carried from the beginning was gone now. In its place was hesitation, doubt. The blonde slammed her hand down on the desk again, the sound sharp but desperate. "Enough," she snapped, her voice shrill. "Stop listening to him. He's playing you all for fools. He's nothing." But her tone betrayed her. It wasn't authority. It was panic. And then, from the back of the room, another voice pierced the tension. A woman in a long evening gown, Her phone clutched tightly in her hand, called out, "If he's lying, why do you look so scared?" The room shifted. Murmurs turned into a wave of whispers, louder now, no longer controlled. Guests glanced at one another, nodding, their suspicions finally finding a voice. The tide was turning, and the blonde knew it. Her face flushed with anger, but her eyes betrayed the fear spreading inside her. She opened her mouth to snap back, but no words came. The weight of the crowd's gaze pressed against her, stripping away her confidence piece by piece. The officers tugged harder on the man's arms, trying to force him toward the glowing double doors, but he halted once more, planting his feet firmly against the polished marble. The clink of his cuffs rang sharp, echoing like a bell in the vast hall. He turned his head just slightly, enough for the cameras to catch the fire in his eyes. His voice, calm yet commanding, rolled across the room. 15 minutes. N. The words dropped like a hammer, slamming into the marble and reverberating through every ear in the lobby. Phones captured the moment in high definition from every angle. The chandelier above flared, its crystal prism scattering light across his steady face, illuminating him not as a prisoner but as the center of power. The blonde receptionist froze. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her smirk was gone, her confidence stripped away, leaving only the pale mask of fear. The brunette beside her shifted again, her breathing shallow, her silence louder than any defense. The guests weren't with them anymore. The officers weren't either. The countdown was no longer just his, it had become everyone's. And the ticking clock echoed louder in every heart. The echo of his words, 15 minutes, hung in the air like a thunderclap that refused to fade. The chandelier's light blazed down, throwing sharp reflections across the marble floor, illuminating the cracks that were no longer just in the blonde receptionist's composure but in the very authority of the room itself. Her smirk had vanished entirely, her lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tight, and her eyes darted nervously across the crowd. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came. The once steady confidence she flaunted like armor had shattered, leaving only silence. The brunette receptionist stood beside her, her shoulders rigid, her hands clasped tightly. She didn't move, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked from the blonde to the man in cuffs, and then toward the restless guests. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was calculating. The crowd murmured, restless, the whispers swelling into something louder, something harder to control. One guest hissed under his breath, "She's hiding something." Another muttered, "He's not the one who looks guilty here." The ripple of doubt spread, growing stronger with every passing second. The blonde slammed her hand against the desk again, desperate to seize back control. "He's a liar, a fraud," she shouted, but her voice cracked mid-sentence, betraying her panic. "You're all being manipulated by his nonsense." But no one looked convinced. The guests weren't rallying to her words. They were staring, recording, whispering, questioning. Even the officers dragging him forward exchanged uneasy glances, their grips tightening as though they needed to remind themselves who they were supposed to protect. The man in gray kept his shoulders straight, his head held high. The chains on his wrists clinked softly with every step, but the sound no longer carried weakness. It carried inevitability. His eyes swept the room before settling once more on the blonde. "You can shout as loud as you want," he said, his voice steady, carrying effortlessly across the lobby. "But shouting doesn't erase the truth. It only exposes your fear." The chandelier above flickered slightly, as though reacting to the weight of his words. Gasps rippled through the guests, the sound blending with the constant clicking of cameras. 14 minutes, he declared. The air grew heavier. Guests shifted nervously, unsure whether to keep filming or to put their phones down. One man in a tuxedo lowered his camera entirely, his expression dark with unease. A woman near the wall whispered, "Something's coming. I can feel it." The brunette's composure cracked further. She finally leaned closer to the blonde, her voice just barely audible but caught on one of the recordings. "You're losing them. This isn't working anymore." The blonde snapped her head toward her colleague, eyes blazing with fury. "Shut up," she hissed, but her trembling hands betrayed the fear her words tried to mask. Meanwhile, the line of security guards along the wall was beginning to fracture. Once perfectly straight, their formation now looked scattered. One guard shifted his weight, glancing nervously at the crowd. Another tapped his earpiece, whispering something under his breath. They were no longer an unshakable wall, they were men caught in doubt, men wondering if they had chosen the wrong side. The guests noticed. Phones swung toward the guards, capturing their hesitation. Whispers grew louder. "Even the staff doesn't believe her anymore," someone said. The blonde saw it too. Panic flashed across her face. She raised her voice again, but it was too late. The energy of the room had shifted entirely. The control she clung to was slipping through her fingers with every second of the countdown. The man's voice cut through the chaos one more time. Calm, commanding, inescapable. 13 minutes. The words struck the lobby like a hammer, the marble echoing the sound back as though even the building acknowledged his control. Guests gasped, phones zoomed in, and the once powerful receptionist now looked cornered, exposed, and terrified. The countdown wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone watching. The lobby no longer belonged to the hotel. It no longer belonged to the officers or the receptionists standing behind their polished white desk. It belonged to the man in gray bound in chains, yet unshaken. Every pair of eyes, every phone lens, every held breath in the room followed him as though gravity itself had shifted. The chandeliers above blazed down with a merciless white light, as though exposing not just the people in the room, but their truths. The blonde receptionist's hands trembled visibly as she clutched the edge of the desk, her knuckles white, her lips quivering in a desperate attempt to form words. The smug grin that once seemed unbreakable had been torn away, leaving behind the raw mask of fear. Beside her, the brunette stood stiff, but her silence was no longer compliance. It was judgment. Every glance she cast at the blonde was sharper than any spoken accusation. The man lifted his head. His voice rolled out steady, commanding, leaving no room for doubt. 12 minutes. The guests stirred, whispers buzzing like static across the lobby. A man in the back muttered, "She's done." Another whispered, "He's not bluffing. Look at her face." The blonde snapped, her voice shrill, desperate, breaking under the weight of attention. "This is nonsense. All of you are fools. Don't listen to him. He's nothing but—" Enough. The single word from him sliced the air. Calm, firm, final. The crowd fell silent. Even the officers holding his arms froze at the steel in his tone. His eyes locked on the blonde, steady and merciless. "You thought chains meant weakness. You thought laughter meant power. But look around you, who's laughing now?" The question echoed off marble and glass, cutting deeper than any accusation. The blonde faltered. Her eyes darted wildly, searching the crowd for support, but finding none. Phones continued recording, every angle capturing the unraveling of someone who had believed she could humiliate without consequence. The brunette finally spoke. Her voice was low, but it carried through the tense air with surprising clarity. "He's right. We've all seen it. You lost the moment you mocked him." The impact was instant. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The guests turned, their whispers swelling. Security guards along the wall shifted uncomfortably, no longer the unshakable line they once appeared to be. One lowered his gaze, ashamed. Another stepped back, his shoulders sagging. The authority that had once belonged to the receptionists was gone. The blonde spun toward her colleague, her voice breaking. "How dare you?" But the words died in her throat. She could see it in the brunette's eyes. Loyalty was gone. The tide had turned. The man in gray stood straighter, the chains clinking softly with the motion. He looked out over the room, not just at the receptionists, but at every guard, every guest, every person holding a phone. His voice rose, calm but unrelenting. 10 minutes. That's all you had left, and you wasted them. Hell. The words struck like a gavel.